And in this video, we're going to talk about referencing, absolute, relative, and the mixed references. So I've gone ahead to create this table. This table is simply a table showing us the expenses per quarter carried out by a certain organization across different categories. These are the categories of expenses: advertisement, logistics, and office supplies. So let's first compute the sum of the total. So I want to see the totals here for every single category. So I want to see what I spent that year for advertisement, what I spent that year for logistics and office supplies in this cell. So to do that, I just use the sum function, and then I select from here and just select this range. So it puts it E5 to H5, and then I close the bracket and press enter. It gives me the amount. Now when I double click this, it autofills down to this point. But then let's observe the formulas and look at what is happening. If we look here, we see that this sum does the E5 to H5 for us, summing all these figures. Where we moved it a cell downwards, see what happened. It did E6 down to H6 for us. And then as we moved down here, it also did E7 down to H7 for us. So you see that it kept on moving. So if for example I had some figures here, let me just put some random figures here, put some random figures here, put some random figures here, random figures here, and then I stretch this down. You see that I have this summation E8 to H8 for me. So you see that as we keep moving down, it keeps moving. The formula keeps referencing the next thing in the sequence. So this first one references all of these. When we move the next cell, it moves one step down, both in the rows and in the columns, and then the same thing for everything getting up to here. So that's basically what relative referencing is. Watch the way your formula will reference some cells as it does its computation, maybe auto filling it down a certain column. So this is normal, where we have seen this being used in the other videos that we have done so far. So this is basically relative referencing. But now we also have another one called the absolute reference. So let's say now I have these figures here, and then I want to, let's say my boss says, okay, he wants to see the total that I have in everyone as a percentage. So I want to see everything I have here. I want to see what percentage of the total of all of this is advertisement. So I don't just want to see the amount, I want to see the percentage of what I did here. So let's just compute the total of this first. So to do that, I come here, I select this, and then I enter, and I have my figure here. So this is the total, summing all of this. So in this case, I want to see my percentage of total. Let me just name that percentage of total here. Percentage of total. So to compute that, I will have to make sure I do this divided by this and put it as a percentage. This divided by this and put it as a percentage. This divided by this. This divided by this and put it as a percentage. So to do that, let's just quickly do this. This divided by the total, and then I press enter. It gives me this. Let me format this as a percentage. I get 40%. Now let me autofill that like we did before and see what we have. Okay, we can see we have an error here. The error here says is the formula or function used is dividing by 0 or empty cell. So you have a 0 division error here. Now why is that happening? Let's inspect the outcome of our divisions. This first one, it divides I5, this is I5, by I8, this is I8. But then if we come to this next one, we see that it divides I6, this is I6, which is fine, by I9, and this is I9 here. This one, it divides I7, this is I7, by what? I10, this is I10 here. That's why you have these errors. So but what we want this formula to do, we want it to keep shifting for this first one. So we need the I5, I6, and I7 to to move. That's as we have it here, the I5, the I6, and the I7 should move. But we want it to constantly divide by I8, which is this figure here. So to do that, we are going to do what we call an absolute referencing. So I always want that thing to divide by this. So to do that, we'll come to this formula, and then in the part of the formula that you want it to always stay on, that's this I8. I always want it to always stay on this, the denominator to always stay on this cell reference here, while the numerator keeps moving as based on whatever cell that category that we are computing. So to do that, you have to put a dollar sign before the column and the row, before the column and the row. So you know this is column J. What we are referencing, sorry, is column I. That's this is column I, row 8. That's why you have I8. So I want it to stay in that column. So you can see what I did here. I put a dollar sign before the I, which is the column, and a dollar sign before the 8, which is the row. So when I do that, it is going to stay on that column. So if I now come and do the autofill here, look at what we have here. We have 26, we have 34, and that should all add up to 100, which is what we have down here. So if you inspect the formula, you see here that we have I6. Inspect it, you see it is I6 divided by this, which is what we want. If we inspect this, we have I7 divided by this, which is what we want. So we saw that we kept it at this, the denominator at this, kept it referencing this cell regardless of the shift that was happening for the numerator, and that's how we're able to get our percentage of the total. Another way to put this dollar signs, if you don't want to hard code it like this, you can just, when you are on that part you want to put it, you can just press the F4 key, and once you press the F4 key, it's immediately, press it once, then it immediately puts the dollar sign for you at both at the column and at the row. If you want to just put it in front of one, that's maybe you just want to, you want the column to shift but you don't want the row to shift. If you press it again, if you want the column to shift but you don't want the row to shift, you press it again, you see that we have the dollar sign just in front of the 8. If you press it again, you see that we have the dollar sign just in front of the I, which is the column, and if you press it again, it's out. So, but for absolute reference, you just press it once and then you have it there. Just know that wherever the dollar sign is, it's meaning that that particular thing will not move. So if it is in front of I, which is the column, the I will not move, the column will not move. It will keep on staying on this column. If it is in front of the 8, then 8 will not move. Another row, which will remain at row 8. So that's fine for us. So that is the absolute reference. We have looked at the relative reference, which was what we used to compute this. Then we have looked at the absolute reference, which is this here. Now let us look at another one, that is the mixed reference. So for the mixed references, I want to create, let me just duplicate this table here. So Control C, count on empty space and press enter. And then now what I want to show here is that I want to see, instead of having what was actually spent per quarter, I want to see them as a percentage of the total for the year. So for example, in this quarter one, what I want to see here is this divided by this, and get that percentage and put it here. For this, see this divided by this, put it here, like that up to this point here. So in other words, when I sum up all these percentages across these 4 quarters for this category, I'm supposed to get 100%. So to do that, let us quickly compute it. We'll come here. Let's see whether the relative reference will work for that. Come here, I divide this by this, and I press on enter. Format that correctly to percentage. I have 24%. Then let me just click and drag and see if that works. Okay, I have problems. See here, I have 24%, but this is totally off 457,000%, and here we even have errors and errors here. So let's look at it and see what went wrong. So if we come here, look here, we see that, okay, let's look at the first one first. Look at this and we see that, okay, it divided this by this, which is what we wanted. That was fine. But then when we come to the next one, you see that it divided this, and this cell shifted because we did not lock it in. If we check this one also, you see that it shifted to an empty cell. So that's why we have the zero division error and this one here. So what we want to do now is that we want to lock this cell in. So let's come back to this formula and just press the F4 key, which locks this cell for us. So all our divisions, these whole divisions will be dividing by this cell. So by using the absolute reference here, and then let me see whether the absolute reference will cut it here. And when I do that, I just click and drag across the 4. And what do I have here? Okay, this seems to work fine. Total is 100%. So that's fine. Let's inspect them. This is this divided by this, which is fine. This is this divided by this, which is also fine. Check the last one we have for quarter 4 is this divided by this, which is awesome. So now let us just drag this down and see whether we are good. Okay, now let's inspect this. First of all, this doesn't even add up to 100, which is the first red flag. So but let's inspect each and every one of them. So if I look at here, you see now that this is still referencing the total for advertisement, even though we have entered into logistics. So what do we do now? We're going to make sure that it is referencing the right cell. So we want this to be divided by this, not fixed here. And the reason why it's fixed there is because we used the absolute reference. So regardless of the shifts in the cells for the first part of for the numerator, the denominator stayed fixed there. So let us come there and move it. So what do we want? We want that, okay, we remain on this column, but it should shift down the rows. So that means we want to remain on column I, but the rows want to remain on column I, but it should keep shifting down the rows based on as it moves down this category. So I will just come here, and instead of absolutely referencing this column, I'm going to change this to a mixed reference. Now a mixed reference meaning that either you stay on the column and move down the rows, or you stay on the row and move to the left or to the right of the columns. So to do that, I'm going to, since I'm staying on the column here, I'm going to remove the $ from the column. I'm going to leave the $ on the column, sorry, and then remove the $ from the row. So we have $I and then just ordinary 5, and I click on enter. You can also achieve that by using the F4 key. So let's say I came here and this was just I5. This was just I5. I press $, I5. I press F4, and then you see that it does the absolute reference in there. If I press F4 again, you see that it locks the row. That's row 5, but that's not what I want. So if I press it again, it locks the column and releases the row. So that's what I want. So the $ is in front of the column because that's the column I want to stay on, but I want to move down every step on the row. So if I click on enter, then I'm going to drag that to the left. This is still going to work fine for this because it was referencing the first one. But when we drag it down now, see what happens. See that our figures have changed. Okay, let us inspect. Okay, we're having 100% for every category, which is fine. Let's inspect the formulas and see what happened there. So here we see that we're dividing this by this, which is what we wanted. If we look at this last one, we're dividing this by this, which is what we wanted, which is awesome. Now if we look at the last one for office supply, let's check to be sure that we got what we wanted. We're dividing quarter 1 by the total, which is fine. Let's look at the last one, dividing this by this, which is what we wanted. So that is how you do your relative referencing, your absolute referencing, and your mixed references. As a recap, we used this to explain the relative referencing, which is the normal one where it moves down as you move. Nothing is being locked. For this total, we locked onto this. So for this total, we locked this cell. So every single computation was, the denominator was this cell. So that's how we explain that absolute reference. When you absolutely reference a cell, you know that the $ is in front of the column and the row. So here we have $I, $8 there. But for the mixed referencing, the $ is in front of one of them. So here we wanted to lock the row, we wanted to lock the column. So we wanted to stay on column I, but move down the rows. So move down column I, but stay on that same column. So we're moving down column I from 5 to 6 to 7. So we locked column I and left the row to be flexible enough to move. So that's why we could move down that row. And if you come here, you see that we moved down the row respectively. So that covers it for absolute, relative, and mixed references. I hope with this we'll be able to understand how these three types of referencing works. I'll see you in the next video.